Welcome everybody, thanks for joining us for another video in our e-bike light shootout this year. You might be a little confused because this bike was in our full power e-bike shootout earlier this year, but it's a really interesting category, the e-bike light space as we're calling it. It's not quite SL anymore. It's not just like reserved for mid-power bikes. At 46 pounds, this bike's lighter than some of the mid-power bikes that we've got in the shootout. So that's why we thought it'd be worth bringing the Moterra back for a review in this shootout. So let's get in and see if we still like this bike as much as we did in the full power shootout. Let's go. So before we get into it, we'd like to thank Outdoor Research, Schwalbe Tires, and Ride Concept Shoes for helping make this shootout series possible. We've got 11 bikes battling it out head to head, and we've been fortunate enough to stay at the Running Y Resort here in Klamath Falls. So thanks also to the Running Y for hosting us. Sean, I think you were the first person to ride this bike back in like, I don't know, February or March?
I was.
So lead it away.
So should I start with spec, that sort of stuff, or you want to get right into riding price?
Let's go with a kind of talk on drive unit, weight, spec.
Okay, so we've got the SL1. It's the middle of the road spec offering from Cannondale. It's got a Shimano EP801, a custom 601 watt-hour battery, a nice little top tube integration here that shows you your battery bars, mode, all that, or you got the display on the handlebars and your traditional rocker switch to change modes. Our build comes with a set of SRAM code brakes, factory suspension, 36, Float X, and just a myriad of Cannondale parts and DT Swiss wheels. So this bike is kind of interesting. It comes with a 62.5 degree head tube angle straight from the factory. Way too slack for a 150, 160 bike in my opinion.
Yes, I think we all agree there.
But thankfully Cannondale does send the bike with a headset adjust, which you can steepen it 1.2 degrees. So we're now at 63.7 degree head tube angle.
Still slack.
Still slack, but much better.
Okay.
I did ride it in the 62.5 degree head tube angle at first, and it was almost unrideable, at least for our home trails, which had some tight turns. So like going around switchbacks and things like that was just almost impossible without having to put a foot down and kind of pop off.
And I think it kind of made an already low bottom bracket, the lowest in the test, even lower, right? And it made the wheelbase longer. So getting up and over, rocks, kind of weaving between tall embedded lava rock, which we have a lot of, it just made bottom bracket, crank, pedal strikes even more drastic.
Like, and it had the wandery kind of front end too, so like you couldn't really weight it.
Yeah.
It's
steeper head tube angle for sure.
Interesting geo.
Yes.
I think another interesting fact, this bike has full power motor.
Yes, it is one of, what is it, three bikes that are in the e-bike light shootout that have a full power drive unit. And kind of why we did that, right, is, and we'd love your feedback and opinion. I think originally, this was an SL bike shootout, and then we're like, well, not all these bikes are super light. Yeah. Maybe we'll call it a mid-power shootout, but then it's like, well, we've got full power bikes that are lighter than mid-power bikes, so it can't be a mid-power shootout anymore. So we're going with e-bike light. We don't know what to call it, but that's what we're going with for now. But I am a huge fan of having more power, more range, and a bike that's 46 pounds.
It's 46 pounds?
Yeah, and I mean the Santa Cruz, for example, which is a couple $1,000s more expensive, does not come with performance levels, Kashima factory suspension.
Or a wireless drivetrain.
Or, an electronic wireless drivetrain. That bike is less than a half a pound lighter, and it's only got a 430 watt-hour battery with the Fazua drive unit. So
And the weight on this, it's down low. It feels very low slung where that weight is, and the tall stack, small back wheel gives you that like moto feel that you're just like really, really in the bike.
It's interesting times. And another one is the Devinci eTroy Lite, which has the Bosch Performance Line SX drive unit, also a mid-power drive unit.
It's 46 and a half.
They're almost, they're identical pounds.
Yeah.
So,
very interesting.
yeah. So, okay. the classifications, it's all muddy waters. Let's get into how the bike rides. Cole, you were not at the full power shootout. What were your thoughts when you first hopped on?
Yeah, first thought was instant comfort. I think that as bad as that head tube angle can be in certain situations, it also can make me feel really comfortable as a rider. Also had a relatively tall stack. Again, another fact that I really enjoy. So right away, I was ready to just dive into corners. And there's one corner in particular that had a little bit of a rock ledge and no support in the corner. I was like, oh, I can jump into this, and just weighted my inside foot and just ripped through it. And confidence and comfortability right off the bat was awesome. Climbing, I mean, it was great. Definitely, I think one of the more comfortable climbing bikes in my opinion.
Minus the saddle.
The saddle is very, not good on the saddle, but I really enjoyed this bike, and that shock tune, it all just blended together to just make a very enjoyable experience. I wasn't getting tired on the climbs. I shot up some stuff that I wasn't expecting, and yeah, no, it was super fun.
Okay.
I cleaned a climb on this bike that no one else did. Well, no one else also tried it this trip, so I will take that.
We don't want to be stuck.
I will take that.
Okay, I think for me, this bike was one of the most fun and confident feeling, one of the coolest bikes to corner. And I kind of likened it almost to the Santa Cruz in terms of like a power position when you stood up and that seat was down. Especially like here on the stuff at like Moore Mountain in Moore Park. It was really, really fun. And I did find some of the limitations of the really long wheelbase and that slack head angle. 1283. So yeah, the second longest only to the Kenevo. So yeah, I did find that, like, cause that's a very hand cut trail system, not great lines of sight, tight, unexpected switchbacks that you can't see coming up, and just very dicey. And there would just be moments where I'm like, oh dude, I can do anything I want on this bike and it'll do it. And then there were spots where I really had to slow it down, or like I would try to have to be careful and put a foot down to slide the back end just to keep the front end from going off the side of the trail. But
it rode shorter than the numbers say, I feel like, even with the slack head.
For the most part it did. Yeah, it did not feel like the Kenevo, which is the only bike that was longer at all. It did not feel that long. But it just, on tighter trails, it is a limiting factor. Even without having a really awkwardly long reach at all. The reach was really in tune for us. But I liked the suspension platform a lot. I like the power, the range it gives me, like, and the weight. It's a really, really solid bike all around. Did you ever, I know you guys said your feet size 12s and kind of big bulky shoes that you guys were wearing this week, but did you ever think about the flex stays? You're someone who likes to, well, I guess you guys both kind of break stuff.
Not flex stays in sense of ride characteristics.
Okay.
But the heel catch, especially when like picking up and going into a rock roller or trying to lift up over something, inside of my heels were catching. I run my cleats like pretty angled in, or heels angled in, so that exaggerates that.
Right.
But I wouldn't say I didn't have any scary moments. It was like, just like, oh, hey, there it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I'd noticed it on, like, after compressing the suspension, it like, it coming back up, my heels would catch, and I'm like, oh God, what is that? And then eventually I was like, oh yeah, I'm catching chainstay. But
okay. But in terms of like ride quality, worriness of it being a strength issue or anything like that. Okay. So, I mean, because there are non-flex stay bikes where you are also rubbing your feet a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So for me, this bike is a really solid contender. I would say I really like technical climbing, and I like chunky trails. So like the geo numbers aren't ideal for me. I really like the bike, but the geo is a bit of a hang up. So, you know, that's obviously not a factor for everybody and for everywhere they ride. I think if you ride purpose-built bike trails instead of like maybe multi-use trails, like that could be the difference. But yeah, solid bike. Sean, ideal place you think? I know you really like this bike.
I do really like this bike, but yeah, like you said, I mean, the low BB and 165 cranks or so, it's definitely not one that you want to be pedaling up a chunky trail, like,
especially with switchbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, out at Horse Ridge, it's like just littered with rocks, and you have no choice but to pedal over them, and you will be reminded constantly how low that BB is.
Definitely, I think this is one of the more terrain-dependent bikes we have, in sense of understanding what that low BB means and if that's going to be an issue for you, or if you just want to rally up fire road full power and just burn your elevation. Like, this is
it's a sick bike.
Yeah,
I mean, I never second guessed anything going downhill. It was just like, I'm just gonna send it and see what happens. Like,
I love descending on this bike.
Yeah,
it's a blast.
It's extremely confident, I think.
It hides its wheelbase and weight very well. I actually, until we started filming this, I didn't realize the wheelbase was that long. Like, it didn't to me. I also didn't ride it at Moore, where we had a lot more J-style corners, but yeah, that didn't seem to hold me back in pitching it into corners and things like that.
Okay, right on. Well, that is the Cannondale Moterra.
Who would you say the ideal riders for?
Oh goodness, I
was gonna say aggressive trail rider type.
I would kind of say that the ideal rider for this is maybe an enduro rider who doesn't have overly rough terrain. Maybe like a flow trail rider as well, like someone who wants to go steep and fast, but maybe like doesn't have like mega huge hits where they need more travel than this has, right? Because like sometimes you have to buy a 160 or 170 mil bike to get this type of geo. And there's a lot of places that like don't need or justify having that much travel to make it such a big squishy bike. So I definitely think purpose-built mountain bike trails are going to suit this thing a lot better than like the multi-use backcountry kind of
a lot of the hand-cut stuff that's not so groomed.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, a sweet bike otherwise though, and I think for the right person, this thing shreds, and I would love to ride it in those terrains. So.
Absolutely, I agree.
All right, well, thanks again to Outdoor Research, Schwalbe Tires and Ride Concepts for making this series possible. Stay tuned. Again, this will be going up against 10 other bikes before we get to our grand finale roundtable. So stay tuned for the series. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you out on the trails.